Okay, to recap in a nutshell, Flash is a strongly typed language. That means you have to declare what it is as you declare it. It's very good for certain things. It's also scoped, meaning, like up here, a public class, which is a type of object, extends something that already exists in Flash. Public means anything can access that. Public is the source. Public is the loader. Public is the index of the loader. So anything of the type media2, if you access anything public, you can get the values out of it. You can also get the function out of that public object. Anything protected cannot be accessed outside of itself. It's a scope. Basically, it looks into itself, it knows what it can do, but nothing outside of it can access that because it will break things, mess up things, etc., etc. So this protected function is the initializer. The function is some arbitrary name that they've given it, but it does expect an event, which is of the class event. It does not return anything, which is the void right there, but you don't really need to worry about that most often. Unless you're familiar with like C++, you don't need to worry about void. Basically what it's doing, and let's start with this public function. To load an image, it declares a new loader instance. Loader has the attribute content loader info. The attribute of a loader, this basically comes from this. So this is as a variable by itself, doesn't have any idea what it is. With the exception that you've declared it to be a loader up here, you're instantiating a brand new loader here, and the loader, by doing that, gets all these crazy attributes, methods, stupid, silly stuff you can never remember for the life of you. I don't expect anybody to remember this crap, quite honestly. Google it. That will be your answer. Always. Google is your friend. So it has content loader info, which is receiving an event listener, which is event.initialize. So when the initialize event, which is when the Flash ad gets compiled, is triggered, it runs the init handler function, which is down here, and we'll talk about that in a second. It adds another child for the loader, and basically says, hey, photo stepper, which is on this thing, it's declared right up here, this instance, add an event listener, so when you change something, not necessarily mouse click, not necessarily mouse out or mouse down or mouse over, which we all could do, but when it gets a change event, run the change handler. So basically what it's saying is build the framework, add it to the page, listen to the photo stepper, when that changes, do stuff, and then, you know what? We forgot to do some very important thing. Load the first image. So load the first image, if we comment that out and try to run this, it probably will work because I forgot to save it. Let me save that first. Now testing. It's not going to do anything because I haven't told it to load the very first step. So if I click up and down, what it's going to do is it's going to detect that change and then load the next one, but it's just not going to have that baseline to start with, if that kind of vaguely makes sense. Let me uncomment that and save this. So now if I fire the load image function, it's going to load that first image and it's going to wait for me to do stuff because those event listeners are just sitting there waiting for that change to happen. So as I click change, up or down, it's going to read that variable and then it's going to load the proper image for that. Looking a little bit deeper into the code, do you guys have any kind of questions before I go any crazy further into it? Or do you want me to just kind of plow through it so you see more of it? Okay. So let's look at init handler. Init handler should load stuff. It's declaring a source, loader.content. Okay? It's giving it an alpha of 0. It gives it an X and a Y position. The .X and the .Y are all parts of a movie clip. See, it's up there. And it adds an event listener to the event enter frame. So as it hits that frame, it's going to go to event frame, blah, blah, blah. Enter frame handler. If this is confusing, it's fine because it's pretty complex, but it's the first example that's the easier of the examples I wanted to show. There's some weird math in the other ones. Basically, we're daisy chaining functions. Load it, listen, go to that function. That function needs something else to happen. Go to that function. That function needs something else to happen. Go to that function. Eventually hit the end of the chain. So here, enter frame handler is this. It listens to the event, returns nothing, is protected, so nothing else can access that. What it does is it says, hey, is your alpha, your opacity, less than 1? If so, add and replace it by 0.2. Well, yes, that's the case. Basically, it's going to fade up the image as you load it. And if you're done, then stop listening to that and, oh wait, what's this? It's calling itself. Can anybody tell me what that is? Anybody? Here, what they could have done, and how many of you are familiar with for loops, or just loops in general? What they could have done is they could have said, while source alpha is less than 1, source alpha plus equals 0.2. And then, I can't remember if there's a then handler in this. Basically, you would do this. This block here is identical to this block here, for the most part. Basically, what it says is, if the source alpha is less than 1, I'm going to add 0.2 to it. So if it starts at 0, it's at 0.2. If it's at 0.2, it goes to 0.4. If it's at 0.4, it goes to 0.6. This one will loop it. It says, while it's less than 1, add to it, add to it, add to it, add to it, add to it. What this does, down here, it's a recursive function, which means it calls itself. And it passes in the value of 0.2. And then it calls itself again. 0.4, calls itself again. 0.6, calls itself again. 0.8, calls itself again. Oh crap, we hit 1. All right, I'm going to stop listening to that, and I'm going to basically go to the next one. So it's another way of doing this loop with a slightly different, slightly more memory efficient method. Recursive functions are really powerful, but it takes kind of a fine-tooth comb to get really good at them. So they're using it here. Don't worry about it. You could loop. It does exactly the same thing, just not quite as efficient as a recursive function.
So that's changing the opacity from 0 to 1, and then you would also be able to reverse that to go from 1 to 0.
Yes, yes. Not in that function itself, but you could if you flipped this to less than and minus. Did you have a question? Oh, good. So that's basically the end of the initializer right there. Load image, where is that? Right down here. Load image, all it does is say loader.load, new URL request means go out and get something from whatever the path is. Get path is this function right here. It returns a string images/image plus the number of the index plus JPEG. And to prove that we're not crazy, where is it? Somewhere here. It's my desktop, isn't it? This. Images has image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.jpg in that folder. So all it's doing is it's giving you that number and it's iterating over it. It's a pretty canned example, but it's, you know, when you start looking at it, it's a little bit easy to understand. It's just there's a lot of different places things happen, and you got to figure out which one calls which item. Events happen in event listeners. They are passed to functions. Those functions do stuff and may call other functions, may add other event listeners. Basically, you're looking at the top of a big, like, messy spider web, starts here, goes there, could go there, goes there, could go there, goes there, so on and so forth. So it all depends on who wrote the thing. I didn't write this, but I probably wouldn't have written it like this. Sometimes you can get around like the added needless complexity that people put into it. If you look at any kind of code on Adobe's website, there's tons of needless added complexity. But looking at the file itself, all of that garbage, jargon, does this. And as I click back and forth, you can see that it's slowly, recursively fading up to get that kind of portrayal. And loading the images, the respective proper images, just from the folder that's out there, relative to the numbers that are in this thingy, counter. So, does anybody have any baffled questions? Does anybody not know where to start asking questions?
I think I might be opening a can of worms here, but how does it actually...
Going to